First of all, thank you very much, Dr. Schilling, for your introduction and for hosting this event. Energy efficiency is quite as important as energy of supply, we can say today, but so it is. Thank you to the eceee for invitation and opportunity to share some thoughts on the importance of energy efficiency in Europe's sustainable growth and competitiveness. If you were hoping to engage in a fierce ideological discussion about the future of European climate and energy policy, I'm afraid that I must disappoint you. I am already convinced of the benefits of the need to act on climate change, of the importance of renewable energy sources in the EU energy mix, and of the vital role of energy efficiency. I'll also start by saying that I believe that any target-based approach should be binding. The sad truth is that if climate and energy targets are not binding, they are not fully reached. Because why should government prioritize future climate and energy targets when its re-election depends on how it lowers energy prices for citizens and industry this week? But when push comes to shove, that is when Putin decides to turn down gas exports, when the Middle East oil cartel double the oil prices, or when our coasts are flooded, the cost to businesses and society will be so much higher. Currently, we spend more than 355 billion euros on fossil fuel imports each year. The International Energy Agency estimates that we will be spending 100 billion more per year in 2035. To avoid this, we need clear framework focusing on long-term security of supply, and we need stable investments climate for the trillion euro investments in energy production and infrastructure that need to be made in the coming decade. Merkel said it really clearly here in May in St. Petersburg, waiting is not an option. In other words, setting for less than ambitious binding targets is simply bad business. The good news is that Europe has had a head start. We have the knowledge, we have the technology, and we have also shown political ambition and will by making renewable energy and also energy efficiency targets key figures as part of the Europe 2020 competitiveness strategy and European semester. Global low carbon and environmental business markets is rapidly expanding and currently worth around 4 trillion euro a year. The EU currently has a 22% share of this, but not for long. Chinese clean energy investments have more than doubled since 2009 and now make up a quarter of the global total. They may be building a lot of coal plants, but they also know that they can't rely on coal as the main source of electricity forever. If the EU settles for status quo, we'll lose out on an enormous economic potential. From the beginning of our discussions on the new Energy Efficiency Directive in the European Parliament, I have argued that being leader in renewable energy technology and energy efficiency is the only way for Europe and for European businesses to remain a central competitive player of the world. Unfortunately, the energy efficiency target is not currently binding, and as a consequence, we will probably not reach the goal of 20% reduction in overall energy consumption by 2020. So the European semester is a huge improvement, but the question of energy efficiency is, in my opinion, too important for naming and shaming. In other words, looking forward towards 2030, we need to seriously consider ambitious binding targets that work together in making Europe more competitive while reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Renewable energy and also energy efficiency targets that work together are crucial to reaching these goals. Therefore, together with the EPP rapporteur on the European Parliament's report on the 2030 framework, Anne Devillot, as well as other like-minded conservatives, I yesterday submitted a package of amendments that emphasize the importance of energy efficiency in decreasing the energy bill and in reducing our import dependency. We also ask for a binding target, but what will be the end result? That's always important to say. What will we have on the end of the day? Europe doesn't have waste fields of shale gas ready to suck out the ground, and oil and gas supplies are limited. So an ambitious climate and energy policy would be something that we can all agree to. Unfortunately, this is not the case. Instead, we are witnessing a polarization of the debate in the Council as well as we see in the European Parliament. On the one hand, we have those who acknowledge the need for ambitious policies and the fact that economic growth and sustainability are not mutually exclusive. On the other hand, you have newly developed economies that are afraid of being constrained by binding targets and who don't see the point of adapting the climate change if the rest of the world doesn't either. These are the people that we need to convince. Let me also today say a few words about the ETS, because how we approach a reform of the ETS will be an important part of determining how future binding targets will be achieved. As it is now, there's too little of an incentive to invest in low-carbon technology and production methods. 4 euros per ton simply doesn't reflect the reality of climate change. The polluter doesn't pay, and polluting actually pays off. Of course, we know what's the problem. The economic crisis has left us with a surplus of almost 2 billion allowances. The so-called backloading initiative has now been approved by the Council, but pulling out 900 million allowances temporarily is not enough, seen from my perspective. I think a reform of the ETS should at least include supply adjustment mechanism so that falling demand is reflected in the supply of allowances. We shall also make sure that the linear reduction factor entering into force in 2014 and currently set at 1.74% is aligned to our greenhouse gas emission reduction objective of 80 to 95% in 2050 compared to 1990. However, regardless of what the end result of an ETS reform will be, investors need to know now in which direction the wind is blowing. The 2030 framework is our chance to settle on realistic but binding and ambitious targets that will keep European society and businesses ahead of the game for decades to come. And once again, when we speak about energy efficiency, I just mentioned that we use more than 355 billion euro each year for fossil fuels. We are speaking a lot of job creation. Saving 20% of that amount could be used for new energy renovation in our buildings all over Europe. And that's job which can't be outsourced out of Europe, also on the other hand. So I really think we have a lot of opportunities, we have a lot of challenges, because also when we speak about 2030, if we ask the companies, the people who want to invest in future technologies, 2030 for them, it's Tuesday next week. So it's time to act now. So once again, thanks so much for the invitation to today's discussion, and I look forward to that. Thank you.
My name is Brooke Riley from Friends of the Earth Europe. Actually, this question would have been for all of the panelists, but seeing as how Mr. Bendtsen is leaving us, I'll put it to you, and then I'll remind others about it later. I fully agree with what you're saying about the vital importance of energy savings. When I look at what is happening with the 2030 climate and energy dossier at the moment, I see far too many interests in the Commission, but also some member states, including Denmark at the moment, which are talking about a 40% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. Now, there is compelling evidence from multiple sources that 40% greenhouse gas emissions would cap the development of energy savings, and therefore restrict what you say yourself is vital, which is to shift all this money going to Russia and other countries and start investing it in Europe. We will have that if there is demand for energy savings in Europe, but that demand will not exist if the greenhouse gas target for Europe is too low. So I would simply be very curious to hear what your view is on this 40% greenhouse gas target, and whether you would not think that a higher number, Friends of the Earth believes 60% is necessary, but I'm sure we can settle in between. And the impact this would have on creating demand for energy savings, but also renewables in Europe. What message you would give to the Commission on that? Thank you.
When I see what will be the result of the discussion of 2030, I think we will get a target for CO2 emissions. But in my point of view, that's not enough. Then we can discuss 40, 45 or more. But I think it's very important that we also have a binding target for renewables. We also need a binding target for energy efficiency. And I think to just have a target for the CO2 emission, that's not enough in my perspective. So I can't give you a clear answer about it is 45 or more. That depends on negotiations. But I think it's more important to say that we really need 3 binding targets. When I am listening to the European Parliament at the moment, the different groups, I don't think we will get binding targets for energy efficiency or renewables because of due to the economic crisis we see in Europe. But that's what I will fight for in my group and in the European Parliament.
Okay, Andreas Göttler from the European Industrial Insulation Foundation. I fully agree with you, but I would say maybe it's okay to have one binding target, but this binding target should be energy efficiency and not one of the other two. Because we all know, I think, we emit in Europe about 11% of the CO2 emissions in the whole. So if we reduce it down to 4%, okay, this is not going to save this planet. This is not really going to help us. With renewables, there's a lot of discussion. If you put too much money into it, they stop to develop it, and so there's even the technology going back because they're so spoiled. This is an experience we had, and all the know-how went to China. But energy efficiency is something we really need in Europe, and I just don't understand why it's not top level of the agenda. Do you have an explanation for that?
I think it's difficult to have the right explanation for that, because I come from a country, Denmark, where we have had energy efficiency for decades, and it always started in the 70s when we had the first oil crisis, and we have continuing in developing our energy efficiency. I think we have so many low-hanging fruits when we look at Europe in this area. We can also find them in Denmark too. A lot of production sites in our businesses still have a lot of opportunities. One of the key questions about that is financing, because do you have a private businessman and he has a business case for 3 or 4 years payback time, he often do not choose to make this energy efficiency. So if we look at the housing and the buildings in Europe, there's a lot of potential. But I'm very happy that we got the energy efficiency directive under the Danish presidency this year. If we had the same discussion in Parliament this autumn, after the energy efficiency directive, you would have had awful result, I'm sorry to say. And that's due to the economic crisis. If we ask some of our colleagues from Italy, Spain, Portugal, etc., just for an example, they are really struggling with finding the money in their municipalities, etc. So the result was quite good. And that's the way forward. And I fully agree that we have to look how we use our money at renewables. There's no doubt that we have extended markets for solar cells in Germany, which are used very badly. And we see also other places in Europe where we have used too much money for renewables. So one of the items when I speak with people in renewables is they have to reduce the costs for renewable for the future. That's needed if they want to continue selling all their products. But I do not know why it is so difficult in the European Parliament. And sometimes I have the most toughest discussion in my own group, I'm sorry to say. So it is, but we really think that the only way forward is not, of course, when I am in this place today, we speak about energy efficiency, that's very important, but ETS, renewables, and is also very, very important for the future. I think we must go hand in hand with those binding targets if we want to get the best results.
We take the last question here.
Okay. Thank you. Jen Wally, UK Parliament. This policy is very much framed in terms of energy and in terms of competitiveness. And you've
once again.
The policy debate this afternoon is very much about energy policy, and it's also about competitiveness. And given that you've framed it in terms of the 2030 targets that we need to have, how do you see the European Commission looking at other aspects of European policy, including the state aid rules and the notification in terms of relaxing the state aid rules in relation to nuclear, and how nuclear then fits into this debate as it affects energy efficiency?
I think it's up when you speak about nuclear energy. I come from a country where we politically have made the decision not to work with nuclear energy, nuclear power stations for producing energy. I also know that the UK have now decided to make a nuclear power station in Somerset, I think it is, EDF, Energie de France, with Chinese money, and the result of the end of the day is that the price for energy the next 35 years will be much higher than we see from windmills. So that's really, but it's up to the member states to take the decisions. When I see about our commission today, we know that their time is running out here in the spring, and I hope that the targets I know that Connie Hedegaard has for these items will continue in a new commission in the future. We do not know. We are waiting for the message here, what to do. I see that probably the commission are more progressive than the member countries and the parliament.